Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we're looking at the first part of the three-part finale of Series 3, Utopia. Now, this wasn't advertised initially as a three-part finale. It was kind of stealth in that regard. Um, and that's a big part of this story as well. Because obviously you think it's just a story about the end of time and, the end of the universe and everything like that. And then out of nowhere, we get the twist ending at the end, which we will get to. But I think it's important to discuss this as its own standalone episode because it is very different from the next two parts in the story. In fact, this is one of those weird ones where all three episodes feel really distinctly different in this three-parter. Like the first one is this, like I said, it's the end of the universe, come to Utopia. Then the second part is a political thriller with Harold Saxon, and then the final part is um, post-apocalyptic Earth ruled by the Master. um, in the wake of all that, I'm surprised at how well this three-parter actually strings itself together in the end. Obviously, we're only talking about Utopia today, um, but yeah, something to keep in mind as we're looking ahead with this, because while this is fairly standalone, it does become more important, especially in the third part.
Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy this episode quite a lot, but I think when I was
Mhm.
watching it, I wondered, is this does this story's greatness really lie in context with the other two episodes that are coming up?
Mm.
Because as you say, it does kind of feed into in a fairly important way to the future episodes. And I,
Well, I think something this episode does incredibly well is intrigue. It's slow
yeah,
intrigue
yeah,
all the way through.
yeah,
Where first you're like, what happened? Like, what is this? What is this society? What is Utopia? And then you're focused on the mystery of Jack, and then you're focused on the character of Professor Yana. Um, but throughout all that in the background, there is this like what could be standalone story of the last humans trying to get them to Utopia and evade the future kind. So I think it's definitely a slower pace overall than most single part stories, but it's subtle in that regard. So when the
mm,
twist ending comes, it's not so much like oh, okay, this hasn't been its own. You don't get the sense of like, oh, of course this has been slow because it's actually act one of a three-act story. You don't get that sense, and I think something else helps. I did say, it is an overall slow paced story, but when the pacing ramps up, it ramps up. Like the
oh yeah,
music helps, especially the extended running sequences. Like Murray Gold's soundtrack is on full blast in this one. The
the
energy
last like
shoots
10,
right up
15
for certain
minutes is.
sequences. Well,
Mm,
even beforehand, like when they're when they're running from the future kind, the music's
mm,
blasting. Jack and the Doctor running down the hallway to get to the Stet radiation chamber. The music's blasting. Like
yeah,
it's good direction in that regard, where like it boosts the pacing and the energy just enough in certain parts to distract you from the fact that this is stealthily the first act and not a complete story on its own.
yeah. No, I think that that makes sense. I think it's interesting, but it's almost as if, how can I put this? It's like a not a lot is happening in this story in comparison to other ones, but except when it is, if that makes any sense. Um, like as you say, the pacing does slow down in a number of sequences, and that's to its benefit. Um, and even the climax, the sort of uh, bridge, I guess, to get to that climax feels kind of quick, but then the climax itself is kind of drawn out. But that makes sense because that's clearly what they're you know what's intended. Because building up to that master reveal, spoiler alert, is pretty important.
Mm, yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Um, yeah, because the entire episode is building up to that moment. It's building up to the reveal of the master. So to that effect, I want to talk about Derek Jacobi first, who plays
Yeah.
Professor Yana, and later, for a glorious 5 minutes, the
Mm.
master himself. Um, I am of the personal opinion that Derek Jacobi in this episode delivers one of the greatest single episode performances that the show has ever seen. And part of
It
that is just the extreme range that he's able to shift so quickly. Like the first 40 minutes of the story, it's incredibly he plays it incredibly endearingly. Like we really get to like Professor Yana and all his little like affectations and stuff. Is he becomes really likable and stuff. And then his sudden and immediate shift to the Master, it's similar to the shift from the John Smith to the Doctor, but it's similar it's similar in terms of the tragedy, I guess, because we lose a good person and we get the Master. But it's all you know what I mean? Like, but there's also that extra element of, oh crap, the Master's back. And we
yeah, yeah.
see it. We see it in his face. Like, there's not a single moment where I'm like, it's a similar thing to the John Smith the Doctor thing, where David Tennant played it in a way that there were clearly distinct personas and different characters. And here it's the same, but we also have the added layer of, oh, I recognize the Master in those eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, because like there's no moment where the Master like comes out and says to the Doctor, "Oh, I'm the Master," but that doesn't need to happen. The Doctor kind of knows, um, who he's speaking to, which is kind of great. The performance, as you say, is pretty good. I don't know if I'd say it's the greatest single episode performance. That is a pretty big call because um, I'm sure there are some other really powerful ones, but um, it makes sense that you would make that claim, and certainly your point about his range is pretty spot on because he does, go through a lot of emotions in this story, and even before he makes that sort of immediate switch to the Master, there's that conflict within him where he's kind of being more irritable, and there's he can hear the drums and all the weird little phrases are sort of almost triggering a kind of PTSD within him. It's um it's a performance that it manages to be both subtle but also quite melodramatic and over the top when it needs to be, and that's hard to do, I think, because it's very easy to just go one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and in terms of reintroducing this character to a modern audience, it's also really effective, primarily because it uses established lore from like 2 weeks ago,
Mm.
with the fob watch, and obviously that moment of the fob watch reveal is sort of like it really is a gut punch, like especially the way it's edited, where all the music cuts out and we just get Martha's sense of realization, but then we also get quite quickly the Doctor panicking about, oh, I know which Time Lord would do this,
Yeah.
and being like incredibly panicky about it. And it's such a great way of communicating to us, oh no, it's not a good thing that there is another Time Lord here.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're familiar with the classic series, the moment you see the pocket watch, you got a fair idea of who this is going to be.
Yeah.
They're not going to do this with the Rani, for example. Like, there's only one Time
No.
Lord villain you bring back the first time you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And we hear some. I want to we while Professor Yana is examining the watch, we do hear some audio from past episodes in, like, as the Master is as Yana's like recovering the Master's
I
memories.
think that I
We
think that clip is from the Daemons,
It
actually.
is from the Daemons.
Yeah.
It's when Roger Delgado is speaking to Azal or Azel or
Mm.
whatever that character's name was. We
Mm.
also hear Anthony Ainley's laugh.
Ah, nice.
And also, apparently Eric Roberts from the TV movie agreed,
Huh.
like he gave permission to use his audio, but Fox refused.
Uh,
So we didn't get Eric Roberts as Master, which,
shame.
uh, yeah, it is a shame. But also, like, there's really not a lot is lost. I don't think anyone would put Eric Roberts as their favorite Master. So
What do you
yeah,
mean, Puff? He turns into a weird little ghost serpent in that movie.
Yeah, I started watching that at one point. I got half an hour in, and then I had to stop for some reason, and I just didn't continue for some. I didn't finish it.
Yeah, that's funny how that works. Wonder if
Hmm,
that's got anything to do with the movie itself. Anyway, that's another review
maybe
for another day.
we'll find out.
Yeah.
I think that this is also an episode that really showcases Russell T Davies's the way that he strings together plot lines across seasons.
Mm.
Like here, it's really starting to come into the forefront because we get the Doctor's hand making
Yep.
its first appearance. It will become more important um, in the next season, obviously.
Mm.
But here is when it's the first time it's reintroduced to this show. Certainly, we also get uh, Jack coming back, and we get an in-universe explanation as to not just why the Doctor left him behind in the parting of the ways,
Mm.
but also referencing his immortality. And I am
Mm.
learning here, like that was a thing in Torchwood season 1, but it's not a
Yep.
thing they explained. It's just it's a thing that they finally explained in this.
Oh,
Um,
oh, that's
yeah.
interesting.
And we also get "You Are Not Alone" coming back from Gridlock, and of
Mm.
course, "You Are Not Alone" being an acronym for Yana, Professor Yana, who is the Master, another Time Lord. The Doctor is not alone. It's very good. It's all very good stuff.
I'd wondered, and I think I felt this way for a while, the whole Yana, you are not alone thing. I'd wondered whether that was a little bit on the nose, but I think given the way Doctor Who tends to work and the way the Master tends makes sense. I mean, we had similar weird wordplay with Sutek in the in Empire of Death, so sort of works. Um, yeah. Do you want to? I want to talk about the future kind, but it probably would be better to talk about some of the other characters first.
We can talk about the future kind.
Okay.
It's one of the elements of the story that is very H.G. Wells's Time Machine, which I don't know is a big influence in this story, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Hmm.
Um, there are hunters from the year 100 trillion, the sort of like, at least on this planet, the only ones left, and they are the main threat to humankind as they search Utopia. I don't think they're a particularly strong element of
Yeah,
this story
I was gonna say.
personally. And if you were going to showcase a deranged branch of human evolution hunting humanity, just making the teeth sharp, in my opinion, is a bit weak. Like I think we could have explored that a bit further, maybe making them a bit more
Having
monstrous.
having a having a bunch of mutant Mad Max looking motherfuckers running around in some
I
sort of
mean,
desolate wasteland with
I think that would be
scary
more.
teeth.
It would be more entertaining. Um, it would mean that it would be harder for one to infiltrate the refugee facility and
Yep.
sabotage the thing, which in my mind is another slight against the episode, really, because, and I think I've given a similar criticism to a different Doctor Who monster before, I forget which one, but the way they characterized at the beginning being like ravenous hunters who like hunger deeply for human flesh, I can't really think of one of them as a spy who like plays the long game of infiltrating the facility to like wreck the rocket so they can't escape.
Yeah.
But also, like we see the guards at the start at the front of the facility being like incredibly insistent that they show the teeth. So like how the fuck did they let this one slip? They had one job and they didn't do it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, yeah, I mean, my point was that yeah, the as a monster and even as a kind of plot device, they're not great. Now that you've pointed out how did this guy's teeth not get checked? That kind of makes it even weaker. I think one of the frustrating things about them is, and we've sort of discussed this, I think, with other Doctor Who monsters, is why them, right? Like why this monster in particular? Is it helping that much with story? I mean, it kind of is, but in the sense that it just gets the plot along. But I don't know if it really has anything particularly interesting, certainly thematically, to say.
No.
I mean, the bit where they're being chased by them, I thought to myself, what if it was like I don't know, some sort of toxic gas in the atmosphere or some sort of failing,
like the atmospheric
atmosphere
shell.
generator or something, and they're just running to get away from the air. Isn't there an episode of Doctor Who called Oxygen where they literally have to move from room to room when for fear they're going to run out of oxygen? Or
Yeah, that's a 12th Doctor story.
yeah,
And I don't think it's a room to room thing. I think it's they're trying to get to a specific place, but like the oxygen in their suits is
mm,
failing, and it's a heavy anti-capitalist thing. That one's actually a pretty good story from memory.
yeah. But you know what I mean. Like if it
Yeah,
was
like
something more natural, I guess it still would have done its job because they're not
well,
even. I don't think they're the main point. They're, like obviously the
no,
master's the main point, but there's also this sort of story of human resilience, and I get that. Oh, they're the future can't afford that much. I don't think.
no, the future kind are the red herring villain of this
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
And they're also there to provide a cliffhanger moment at the end of the story, and at that moment, I think
mm,
works fine enough. Like you can't just have the TARDIS disappear; you got to have there be like another active presence that is
yeah. Like an immediate
threatening
threat.
TARDIS crew. Yeah, and that's one of the like the ending is like the big energy, the TARDIS crew about to get eaten, TARDIS vanishing. It's a good cliffhanger.
Yeah, but I mean, like you could even have it so that let's say instead of the horde, there is some sort of something in the atmosphere that can kill you. And imagine that the master maybe tries to hypnotize Shantho or someone in the conglomeration to open the
Uh,
doors or something. The
I don't know.
point
I
is,
think
I
there's something about Jack and Martha simultaneously like frantically yelling over each other to try and hold the door closed, calling the doctor off. Like something about the way that's filmed and edited and acted is genuinely quite effective, and
it.
more so for me than it would be if they were just like, "Oh no, we're suffocating" or "We might be mutating." Like I don't think that's
I
as
mean,
effective a final moment
I
as
mean,
give it.
in a short term sense, I think that is true. There is something very compelling, and certainly by that point, given how much the tension is escalating, I don't think it's something you really question that much. You don't need to in that moment, but I just look at the way that the future kind of is used overall, and I think there has got to be a simpler way
Sure.
to incorporate this sort of tension. Yeah, I'm just not sure exactly how they would do that, but something
Yeah, I mean, at
simpler.
the end of the day, they're a monster. And I'm using that term loosely. That have like maybe 5 minutes of screen time total.
Yeah.
Um, and the main, like I said, the main focus of the story is setting up the master, setting up
Mm,
Jack. It's There's some heavy thematic stuff that really only gets resolved
mm,
in part three of this story
mm,
once we learn what Utopia actually is.
mm.
And it's the whole like the it a lot of it is the human impulse to survive. It's about um you know
Human cooperation and ingenuity and
yeah, and it's also about just raising questions about like at the when the entire universe dies, how do we keep going,
yeah.
and that stuff is like when those elements are most at on song. It's like when the doctor's talking about, look at you, the brilliant humans, like that small speech
Yeah.
that he does as he's walking through. And I like that they do reference like the fact that I guess in this universe, like the theory of everything evolving into crab, like carcinization, I think it is.
Mm,
Um, Clearly in this universe that's the same thing but for human. And I like that they do reference like you do always end up evolving back into this shape, which is kind of necessary to bring up when you're in the year 100 trillion and we still look like us and we
yeah.
haven't evolved further. I think it is necessary to throw that line in, even if it probably isn't that scientifically accurate. It's good to have like at least some kind of reference to it.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
But yeah, we'll bring those themes up again when we explore the Toclafane in
Hmm.
future episodes. I want to briefly talk about Chantho. I think she's really, really charming as a side character. Like she's
Yeah,
really very
yeah,
endearing. I love that small conversation she has with Martha, and
yeah.
um, the acting throughout. How she essentially goes against the custom of her people and doesn't
Mm.
say Chan or Tho, and is like
Mm.
just sort of giggles like a 9-year-old who just said fuck for the first time. Like
Mm.
it's really endearing.
It is, but it also really does help with the characterization because it shows that she's, you know, sort of willing to break the rules for, under certain circumstances, which is why she kind of turns on Yana in the end, which is really kind of great. And I think given how, like, she's not like a super small character, but given her role isn't bigger, she still makes quite an impact, which is really
Mm,
great. I think the one of the stronger points of this story is that when it isn't being like super fast paced and action filled down and allow us to get to know these characters, and we have a lot of really
yes.
nice little interactions to help uh, you know further
Mm.
the characterizations, and Shanto is certainly a great example of that.
Yeah, and it's those moments that make the final master reveal even more tragic, not just for
Yeah,
Yana, but for Chantho herself, who ends up being like
yeah,
hideously betrayed by a mentor figure that she really came to care about.
yeah.
Um, yeah, like those are the moments that I think really help this episode out. And yeah, I it's a shame that Chantho went out like she did. The
Mm.
actress, I forget her name, Chipo Chung. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. She said that playing Chantho was the most fun she'd had in front of the camera, which is
Uh-huh.
nice. And she
Yeah.
would make future appearances in the show. In the episode Turn Left, she appears as the fortune teller who influences Donna's choice to turn right
Mm.
and change time.
Hmm.
Um,
Cool.
which is nice. Is it she's in the movie Sunshine apparently, which is genuinely quite good. She appears in the Loop,
Oh, cool.
which is the Thick of It movie spin-off thingo.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so and she's really good in this.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Um, let's discuss Jack.
Ayo, Captain Jack. Yeah, let's do that.
Um, it's great when a character obviously he had a whole season of Torchwood as well, but he appears again here after 2 seasons, and he doesn't miss a beat. Jack is still a really great and entertaining character to watch. Um, I'm surprised that the chemistry between David Tennant and John Barrowman is like you don't for a second you believe instantly that these two actors personally have worked together before on the show, even though
Mm.
they haven't. Like the camaraderie and
Mm.
the dynamic is there right from the get go. Um, his immortality being used to to like avoid the step radiation is a good use of
Yeah, that that's
it's
quite
good to
clever.
bring him in for this story for that purpose. And that entire conversation between him and the doctor while he's doing that is
Mm.
really great. Just like the reminiscing factor of like two
Yeah.
old mates catching up and exploring, you know, like oh, it's also a moment where Jack gets to confront the doctor, like you left me behind in the year
Mm.
200,000 or whatever it was.
And then
Yeah,
it
he's just used really well here.
that conversation transitions into a pretty serious
Mm,
existential bit, which Jack tries to sort of laugh off, but the doctor
hmm.
insists that he answers the question. Like basically, do you want to die?
Yeah,
Which is um full on.
yeah,
Um, but it works really well here, and like that answer that Jack gives. I thought I
hmm,
did. That feels so right for him.
yeah,
Um, whether you've watched Torchwood or not, that just makes sense, I think.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, it's good stuff.
yeah. And I also like the way that they justify because obviously they get to the 100 trillion because the TARDIS reacts negatively to Jack's presence,
Hmm.
which is something that I just about believe the way that David Tennant's Doctor sets it up by being like, well, I can't shake this odd feeling I get when I look at you, buddy, because you're kind of wrong. And even the TARDIS noticed it. It's like, yeah, okay, that's a pretty neat enough justification for this sequence of events to happen to get the TARDIS where it needs to go.
Yeah, this weird sort of temporal anomaly,
Yeah,
as the Doctor himself might say.
yeah, and I like that they're continuing the um Doctor stopping Jack from saying hi to anyone he sees from
Yeah.
Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways. It's just a
Mm,
nice little bit of consistent character writing.
yeah. Um, yeah, it's quite funny, but it's, as you say, the consistency is also quite
Mm,
appreciated, and it's
yeah.
not like those jokes. They never go over the top. Like they're never longer than they need to be. They're just sort of there, which is quite good.
Yeah. Um, David Tennant's also really great in this. Like, it's an episode where he
Yeah,
gets to really display the range of his character. You
yeah,
know, he gets to be charismatic. He gets to be a little egotistical. He gets to be truly wise. He gets to be bitter and annoyed. He gets to be scared, like properly
mm.
scared.
Yeah,
Um,
and he gets to be silly and but also very
yeah,
serious, and switching from like look, similarly to Derek Jacobi, switching through those emotions pretty quickly but seamlessly,
mhm.
which is kind of great.
Yeah.
Mm,
And in a really believable way as well. Like the main switch for me
mm,
is when he's like sort of gleefully describing to Martha how the technology works involving the rocket, and then his instant switch when she mentions the fob watch.
mm,
Like that to me is such a, a great moment when the Doctor, like,
mm.
without even Martha finishing her thought, realizes more than she does about the situation.
And then there's that bit where he's like, he's almost, I don't know, maybe rationalizing the situation. It's like, oh, it depends which Time Lord, even though, but like, he knows and we know exactly
Yeah.
what Time Lord it is.
Hmm.
And then he kind of has to reckon with that very quickly, and it sort of escalates to him being very disturbed, which is really good.
Yeah. And talking about that moment in a bit more depth as well, I do
Mm,
like the justifications they do for it because, like, at this point, 2007, we've been told nothing else for 3 years that Gallifrey has been destroyed and all the Time Lords are dead and the Doctor is the last of his kind.
mm,
Um, Anyone with a brain in their head would know that at some point they would want to use the Master again.
yeah.
Um, so they would need to come up with a bloody good justification for how the Master survived and how the Doctor for a long time has been saying, I would know if there are other Time Lords left. We have that
Mm.
kind of connection, as both Eccleston and Tennant have referenced on occasion. So they do it in here in a really succinct way. Like, he couldn't detect another Time Lord somewhere out there because he wasn't a Time Lord. Fled the war using a chameleon arch and hid in the one place at time in a place in time which and it's neatly hinted at the start of the episode as well, where not even the Time Lords bothered to look that far ahead because everything was dead. So
Mm.
he knew that he could hide from the Time Lords there. It's a really, like, he's put the legwork in to come up with a situation where bringing the Master back would not feel like a pull, like a leap out of place. Like, it feels um, well justified in universe, and it's just really great. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good world building. Um, there's a mindfulness there because I think with a universe as big as Doctor Who, it can sometimes be easy to drop the ball. So it's good that RTD really sort of thought this through.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Um, we do get like 2 minutes of John Sims Master at the end of
yeah,
this.
and he's great.
Um, he's great. He's got the post regeneration crazies that we've never seen from the Master before because we've
Mm,
never seen the Master regenerate.
mm.
Um, but it does give us a nice little glimpse of who this character will be in the coming stories.
Actually,
Obviously,
I
we'll
wonder
see
if
a lot
he.
more of it next week
Sorry,
and the
okay.
week after with the Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords.
I wonder. Probably have to check it out at some point, but I've got a feeling that we do see the Master regenerate at the end of the Keeper of Traken. Um,
Um,
he
everything
presents.
that I've
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, everything that I've read here indicates that it's the first on-screen regeneration that we've seen of the Master.
Okay, yeah, and that makes sense. I think I'm mainly thinking about the fact that the Lord or King of Traken or whoever it is played by Anthony Ainley.
Right.
Um, so, uh, still, it's a compelling, 5 minutes nonetheless, from John Sim, and he's just got all those qualities that you kind of want from a master, even if he's bringing in some fresh elements like the sort of youthful, swagger. It still makes total sense, and he's got this sort of there's a quality about him, especially the way he's sort of dancing around the TARDIS. He really does seem like the Doctor's mirror image. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, he's like the Doctor because he's a bit of a nutter butter, and he's having a good time. But like, oh, there's something not quite right about this guy. Don't know
No.
what it is, but something that's
And
not great.
we'll find out. And I
Yeah, I
do
hope that
like.
doesn't have any terrible consequences for
Oof,
anybody in the future.
nope. It is amusing as well that Derek Jacobi played the Master in Scream of the Shulker,
I'd forgotten about that.
and I did wonder how deliberate that was. Um, oh, I think it might have. It was probably just simply a case of he's a great actor. He'd be great for this role. Chuck him
Yeah,
in there. Oh, it's a neat coincidence that he's played this character in
yeah.
the past.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like one of those super deliberate things.
No, no.
Um, I
Even
I
though
could even understand if it was like a Moffat story and that had happened. I could understand that, but I don't think for this story.
well, we do know now that to some degree, Scream of the Shulker is canon. Um,
Yeah,
thanks to Richard E. Grant in Rogue.
yeah.
And I've sort of been thinking, okay, how does that affect Derek Jacobi? Like, is Scream of the Shulker like obviously it's a different universe because we've seen Paul McGann regenerate into John Hurt regenerate into Chris Eccleston. Um, but it might imply that even in this universe, Jacobi was the master after Eric Roberts, and then Time War happened. He fled, used the chameleon arch. He would have had to have de-aged himself in the process as well, because he
Mm,
describes being discovered as a naked child on the coast of the Silver
mm,
Devastation.
mm,
Um, we do know that that must have happened to some degree because Jacobi has since portrayed the War Master in Big Finish stories.
mm.
To me, it just firmly cements Jacobi as having been the master before this master as well. Um, yeah, just Big Finish doing all their Time War stuff, giving Jacobi another shot at this role. I do think it would have been good to see Jacobi properly as the master on screen for more than we got him, because I think he would have been great, and I think he would have brought a lot more of the classics era style to them of the master to the role, because that would slowly disappear from the master over his or their, I should say, portrayals during Revival Who. There's a bit of it in John Sims' Harold Saxon persona, but then by the time we get to the end of time and he's become this sort of like erratic, um, hungry feaster, there's not a lot of it. Then we get a sort of Mary Poppins eccentricity from Missy, and she would bring a bit of the sort of refined, um, for lack of a better word in this context, gentleman master to the role in that regard, but not a lot of it. And then by the time we get to Sasha Dewan, all gentleman is gone from the character, and they're just an insane megalomaniac who
Mm,
bears very little resemblance to their previous counterparts.
mm,
Chibnall.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I would have liked to have seen Jacobi really get to embody the master on screen for a lot longer than he did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair. Um, he does, like, he kind of goes sort of melodramatic in the end there, but it makes sense because
Mm.
that's partly who the master is, and also it's the big moment, and he has to
Yeah.
kind of, go big or go home, so to
Um,
speak.
but we also get new lore for the master here, the drum beat, which is going to
Mm,
become incredibly crucial to John Sims' characterization of this person moving forward. A character trait which has never once been mentioned in classic Who, even though we will learn in future episodes that it started when the Master was a child.
Right. Yeah, did it come from him staring into the time vortex?
That is what is initially believed. We do learn eventually that the High Council of Time Lords implanted that into his head at that point in time, which for me is enough of a justification to get around the fact that this is new lore that has never once been explored in the past, because it was something that happened during the Time War. It was one of those, okay, time travel has changed the course of this character's entire life in a way that could not have been shown before this point, because there was no Time War before this point. I accept it.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll explore the whole sound of four drums thing as we move forward. It becomes way more pronounced in the next story. In
Yeah, yeah.
this, it's another kind of red herring thing, or not a red herring, but it's a clue as to something deeper with the character. But it's sort of characterized as more of like a tragic quirk of this sort of semi-eccentric genius.
Yeah, it almost sounds um like an OCD trait.
Mm.
Um and there is a tragedy in that, to be sure. Um
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's incorporated well enough. And it doesn't need to be anything more than it is.
no,
Although I think I am mainly just saying that because it's obviously going to get explored much more in the next episode.
yeah. And that's kind of where I'm at with the Utopia at this point. Like, we've only been talking for a little over half an hour now, but like the stuff that's here is mostly pretty great, but it 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 can't get around the fact that this is still part one of a three-part story.
Yeah, that's how
And
I felt.
yeah, and like while the setup to the eventual twist is really great, a lot of the character stuff is really great. Like, apart from the future kind, nothing's bad. You know, it's going to be a lot more interesting to talk about the next two episodes.
Yeah, I think like because you said yourself that you, as opposed to other multi-part revival stories we've done, you wanted to do each episode separately because they are so different, and I don't doubt that. But when I was watching it, I thought, I think I even touched on this earlier, like this feels good and important, but I feel like its importance is only really going to be realized in the future episodes. It's
Mm.
in context of the whole package.
Yeah, well, and initially I thought we'd have enough with this one to discuss it on its own merits, but I and it's tough to say, but even though this episode is the part of the three that focuses the most on the end of the universe, the fact that the bait and switch at the end comes kind of means that it can't really explore that concept as much as a standalone story set in this world could have.
Yep. And it's
Like we
only
said,
really,
the future kind are a half baked glimpse at a
yeah.
devolution of humankind. The fact that we don't see Utopia in this, or we all learn what Utopia is. I was gonna say that we don't see much of what the universe of the world looks like, but I think that's a good thing because most things would be dead.
Yeah,
So the fact that we
that's
only get
fine.
glimpses of it isn't too much of a bad thing. But
Yeah.
I thought we'd have more to say about the themes that this episode brings up, but
Mm. But it's
it's
really
really only
only,
here to be a stepping stone to get to
yeah.
future things. And as a stepping stone, it's a fun watch. And of
Yeah.
course, the last 10 minutes are great.
Yep. Sure. Um
But I sort of feel like we're already done, which is
yeah, like it's even with the last humans,
mm,
they're like, it's good that they're here, and there's a sort of a compelling sort of desperation to them, which is really good. But it's only when we see what happens and
yeah,
we see them, how they're linked to, the Toclafane, and finding out what Utopia is in later episodes, that it really sort of comes together.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a bit
Which
tough in that sense.
yeah, and I mean, on one hand, it means that as a standalone story, it suffers, but as
Mm,
part one of this story, the fact that it is bolstered as it is by the eventual Toclafane reveal,
Mm.
kind of good, kind of great. When
Yeah.
we eventually learn what has become of these people that we've spent 35 minutes trying to save,
Mm.
there is a huge element of tragedy and heartbreak there.
Yep. And um, given that the impact of this story is greatest in context with the other two, it still works pretty well as a standalone
Yeah.
story. Like, I mean, maybe apart from the Future Kind, there's nothing in it that I can really point to as a major flaw. Everything else really quite works together, and it's really good that it's able to slow down and help us to really um, get to know these characters.
Yeah, and
Makes it
I'll,
very
I'll put it.
endearing.
I'll also put it this way: like this episode structurally is very similar to Fugitive of the Jadoon from series 12. That episode is also like it starts out as this Jadoon hunting someone on Earth story, but then by in the last 10 minutes it pivots into this really big reveal that sets up the future of the series and especially the series finale. And I'm gonna say it, Utopia holds up a lot better than Fugitive. I don't think that's an unpopular take to have
Yeah, not it's a
because
pretty freezing cold take. So
yeah, and I mean like the clues that we get in Utopia don't contradict the stuff that we learn about this in future episodes. Unlike Fugitive of the Jadoon, which gives us massive hints that cannot possibly link back to what it's trying to set up.
mm.
And also, Fugitive has this other unique thing where before you get to the reveal, it's basically a paint by numbers Smith and Jones again, where the Jadoon. We're shown basically nothing new about them or their
Mm.
species. It's all just the same stuff from series 3.
Yeah.
At least here, there's so many new ideas about the end of the
Yeah, yeah.
universe and Time Lords
And good characterization.
and good characterization, which is maybe the main thing to consider when comparing it to an episode from the Chibnall era. Good characterization,
Mm.
something that we never got apart from like one or two occasions.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah, that's what I'll say about Utopia. It's unfortunately half baked on its own, but a very strong first chapter. And I'll say this again, like a very strong stealth first chapter.
Yeah.
Because again, like the whole episode, whether you know it or not, and the first time you watch it through, you're not knowing it, builds up to the master reveal. But on a rewatch, it couldn't have ended any other way.
Yeah. And there were even moments where I thought, the fact that it's the master and that's the big reveal, could I have seen that coming if I hadn't seen the other two episodes? I know it's very difficult to not consider it along with the other two episodes, but I thought, how easy is it to figure that out? But then I thought, one, it's not as easy as I thought it was. There is
No.
enough, red herrings and deceitful qualities with the storytelling, so that it is quite a big
Mm.
twist. But even by the end, when you're starting to suspect, oh no, I think it might be the master, it's still really powerful because you're like, you feel the same way the Doctor does, I imagine, where you're like, oh please don't let it be him,
Yeah. Sorry,
please.
I just realized I made the comparison to Fugitive of the Jadoon. That episode also features a chameleon arch.
Huh.
I didn't even realize that until wow, they're more closely linked than I thought. But yeah, like going back to the would you see it coming? I don't think there's any way you possibly could because, like I said, for 3 years you've been told over and over again there are no more Time Lords,
Yeah,
and it's
I
it's
think it
the Fob
might.
Watch reveal that makes you go and ties literally everything together.
Mm,
Like that one thing of Yana pulling out the Fob Watch.
mm,
It contextualizes his actions prior to this point. It uh, cements human nature and family of blood as
mm,
crucial watching if it wasn't already the case from a character perspective. Now it's important from a plot perspective as well.
mm.
Um, yeah, like, but again, it's like you watch it back and you go, oh, That's why Yana behaves this way. That's why he
Yep.
is who he is.
Mhm.
It all makes sense. So
Yep.
it's not really the kind of mystery you can pick up the clues on, because like the most important clue is deliberately hidden from the audience until it is
Until
revealed. It's not like this isn't like a Sherlock Holmes thing where it's like, ah, you, the audience, could have also pieced this together if you were as smart as Holmes. It's not that in this instance. It's a lot more of a, it's a mystery to all until it's not.
Yep. So yeah, I think me thinking that I, could have figured it out, I think that's mainly because I know what's coming, right? We've
Yes.
both seen episodes, and we know how big the ending of this one is, so
Yeah.
that's probably the reason why.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Mm.
Um, like I said, there's really not much more to discuss with this one. I think we're done
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Um, I am going to give Utopia an 8.
Um, yeah, I think I'll give it an 8 too. Flawed with some elements maybe,
Sure.
um, but at the very least, the good elements are so good that I can't give it, I think, any less than an 8.
Yeah. Right. Well, we're going to have to leave you on a cliffhanger regarding this 3-part story, because next time we're going to be watching Arc of Infinity,
Mm.
which
And if
also
you
deals with Time Lords.
and if you thought the words Omega and Amsterdam couldn't appear in the same Doctor Who story, well, that's your problem.
But until then, I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and you
You
are
are
not
not.
subscribed, so you should subscribe. Subscribe to us, please.
That's great.
I finally got a good outro. Finally, I did one and it was good.